Hello, and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast. My name is Art. Today we're going to be talking about libraries. And as some of you know, I love libraries. I love them so much that I married a librarian. So she keeps me well stocked on books that I might enjoy. Well, today I've got a special guest on, and I'll be talking with him here in a minute. He has worked in libraries and youth development and programs of that nature, and he had some incredible stories to tell about his time at the library. But before we get started, I want to share a couple of things that I have been enjoying in reading lately. I kind of got a little carried away with some of the classics I'm reading. I'm actually reading about 3 different classics right now. I'm rereading Jane Eyre and thought it was time. I got a beautiful edition of Jane Eyre for Christmas, so I'm rereading that. I'm also reading Daniel Deronda by George Eliot, as well as Phineas Finn by Anthony Trollope. Those 2 I haven't read before, but I'm enjoying both of them quite a bit. But I've just started, so I haven't gotten that far through those 2 yet. So a couple books I've just finished reading. One is called Fresh Brewed Murder. It's a cozy mystery set in Portland, Oregon. The setting is a coffee cart that the main character runs, and she's just starting her business when within a day or 2, she finds a dead body outside of her coffee cart that might just have a connection to her past. That was a really enjoyable read. And I used to live in the Pacific Northwest. I lived in Washington, but the Pacific Northwest vibes are there, and I really enjoyed the setting of that mystery as well as the characters. It looks like there's going to be a bigger overall mystery to solve surrounding the main character and her mother, but and I'm really interested in that and to see where that's going to go. But that's Fresh Brewed Murder by Emmeline Duncan. And then I also just finished reading Broken Places and Outer Spaces by Nnedi Okorafor. And that's a short memoir that she wrote about a surgery she had before she became an author. It was like right at the end of high school, early college, and it left her paralyzed for a short while, maybe a couple years. And it tells her struggle of regaining the ability to walk and how that whole brokenness led her into finding joy in writing science fiction. And it's a very powerful memoir. It's very short. It take you a couple hours to read. I listened, they had an audiobook of it, but it's a powerful story. And I talk about it in our interview with Aaron. So you can get some more information on that. I've just recently discovered Nnedi Okorafor's writing, and I've read a couple of her books that have been very, really enjoyable and powerful. So I wanted to keep reading some of her backlog. Today, I do have a quick podcast shout out I want to make. The podcast is called Victorian Scribbler. It's one of my favorite podcasts, and I started listening to them. I think they were still in their first season, maybe second season. And I really enjoyed it because the 2 hosts, Courtney and Eleanor, they have both earned their PhDs, and their podcast is all about exploring the lesser known writers of the 19th century. I think something they sent me said there were anywhere from 1,200 to 7,000 people writing in Victorian times. And that was just in England. I mean, that's a lot. And so, but thanks to their podcast, I've been able to learn a lot about some of the diversity that there was in Victorian writing. So I'm very, very grateful for them, not just rehashing through the same old, top 3 favorite writers. Now, this is coming from a Charles Dickens fan. Okay. I love Dickens. When you think Victorian writer, he's probably the name that comes up. But there are so many wonderful writers. Thanks to their podcast, I've been able to learn about 19th century writers of color, such as Pauline Hopkins. I learned more about Mary Elizabeth Braddon, who is somewhat well known already, but I hadn't heard of her till I started listening to the podcast. We learned about the Trollopes. Mary Shelley was another one, and Mary Corelli. It's a well worth a listen if you like Victorian literature but want to be challenged in your reading to go deeper than the usual. Along with that, I also recently was a guest on the Quick Bites podcast, where I was able to share a lot of what I learned from listening to podcasts like Victorian Scribblers and Bonnets at Dawn, to talk about Victorian literature and my favorite books, and to give some recommendations for how to start reading Victorian classics, as well as some recommendations of some more diverse writers, so you can read more than just the dead white European uh, writer, because it's out there. And if you do the digging and if you do the work, you'll find some great books written by people whose voices ought to be heard. So that's Victorian Scribblers. We'll hear a promo from them here in a minute, and then we'll go into our interview.
You've probably heard about Charles Dickens and the Bronte sisters.
And maybe George Eliot, Anthony Trollope, and Thomas Hardy.
But what about the rest of them? Scholars tell us there were anywhere from 1,200 to 7,000 working novelists in England alone during the Victorian era. And while that lower number is likely the more accurate one, that's still a lot more writers than we're familiar with today.
And some of those authors wrote the novels that inspired Indiana Jones, and many of those murder mysteries and true crime shows that we all like to watch.
Some of them created the characters that inspired the evil queen in Snow White and kicked off tropes like the femme fatale and the manic pixie dream girl.
In Victorian Scribblers, we explore the lives and works of the 19th century writers time forgot. And that doesn't just mean British writers. We cover authors from around the globe.
Wouldn't you like to know their names?
Today, I have a very special guest on the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast. His name is Aaron Whitfield, and he is a skilled youth and family development specialist, author, motivational speaker, podcast content creator, writer, and consultant. Aaron has spent a lifetime creating positive change, inspiring others, and building positive relationships throughout his community. Having spent the past 10 years as an educator, library professional, and youth development specialist, Aaron has invested his skills, talents, and passions directly into the lives of those he meets. He believes that each day is an opportunity to create a positive impact in the lives of others. Aaron is here today to share his expertise on libraries and how they can impact our communities. So Aaron, welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast.
Thank you for having me. I actually sound like I'm a really important person, so that amazes me. So thank you for the intro. I greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, I just took it from your website, so
Yeah, and when I hear it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I did something more important than just wake up and make the kids lunch. So it always reminds me that I have a bit more to my life.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. As we were talking before we hit record, our love for libraries and the impact they can have on the community. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. Libraries have had a big impact on my life, and I'm going to assume maybe on yours as well. But before we get started, I want to start off just with a general question about books. What are you reading right now, or what have you read recently that you'd like to recommend to our audience?
I'm going through, every year I read a couple of the same books and titles. One is Life Itself by Roger Ebert. It's one of my favorite books because of where he was in life when writing this book, the stage of life he was in toward the end of his life, but just how beautifully he writes. I mean, every scene that he describes is almost like he allows us to visit him in his childhood and his adulthood. And so as I get older, I'm learning how to write memories from the past. And so that book definitely inspires me to write and recall memories, if that makes sense. Another book that I'm reading is They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. He is an incredible poet here in Columbus, Ohio, but also just known nationally and internationally. And he has a collection of essays in this book that, in my mind, is almost like a creative writing class. The essays are related and it speaks to his personality, but it's not necessarily like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It's just a free flow of thought. And so my mind often operates in that sort of nature. So when I read his book, I become inspired to once again recall memories, and write them down, because I think it's important that we acknowledge our own history and tell our own story.
I actually just got done reading two different memoirs. One is from a lady I'm going to have as a guest in a couple weeks. I was reading hers, and then I just happened to pick up. She's a science fiction writer, Nnedi Okorafor,
Hmm.
and she wrote it's a short memoir of, and I didn't realize this about her, but she had I think spinal surgery, and it made her paralyzed for a while, and she wrote about the struggle she went through with that and how that led her to find the joy of writing science fiction like she does. And I've just read a couple of her books, and then that one happened to come across, and I thought, well, I really enjoyed the last one I read, and I've got a guest coming on to talk about memoirs. Maybe I'll read a couple, so I picked up that one, and it was a powerful story. How tragedy led to something greater for her, and that's the point. She wants to get her story out.
It's amazing that we each have a story, and that we could look at someone and not necessarily tell what this story is. We don't know the pains that brought on their purpose, and so it's we each have a purpose. We each have a story that needs to be told, recited, because there's so many lessons to be learned from through words, through interaction, through communication. And so now I love memoirs. I learned so much about my life by honoring the life of others, and just sharing that connection, or being able to glean from some of the trials, tribulations, and triumphs that they've endured.
I like being able to look at it from this side of the story, because we know their life story, well, some of them anyway, and as they're walking through the tragedy or the hardship, at the end it's going to be okay, or maybe it won't, the result, but it's so it's interesting getting that overall view, but then getting caught up in their story is very moving, and opens your eyes to the story, the lives of other people, which is always good for us to learn that empathy too.
Yeah, it's the human experience. It is the human experience, things that we all share. I mean, we could be in different points of the nation as we are now, or
Mhm.
across this world, and yet we can find commonality. But we can also learn from each other's differences. And so it is, that's the power of the narrative. That's the power of the story, and the power of history, of being able to recite, being able to share, being able to learn, and being able to teach. I mean, that just all sort of flows within this human experience.
So then when I think about collecting stories, of course, just to kind of segue into our topic here, I think about libraries as kind of a repository of stories, both fiction and nonfiction. What's your history with libraries? Do you have any early memories of being in the library? How did that impact your life?
Yeah, I'm going to age myself a bit, because I
Okay.
remember going to the library I was born in '84. And so my mom would take us to the library, and we would check out books on tape,
Mm-hmm.
and which was a huge deal. For those who don't know what a cassette tape is, you may want to Google it and find the picture. But that was a huge deal. The library was an extension of school. My mother and father were huge believers in going to the library, and checking out books. We had our own library card, which was, I mean, it was liberating at the time. It was the debit card of books for us, as we were in elementary school. And so understanding, early on, that the library was not a place of learning, but also of social interaction. I mean, the various guests and performers that would show up at a library, and we would have storytellers, and just people to share, as we talked about before, their stories or stories of others, but also just a place to have fun. The library was a place of safety, a place of learning, a place of acceptance, but also just a place that was a constant sort of staple in my community growing up. And so I've always sort of held the library in high regard.
I'm sure I've shared my library stories on here before, but for me, it was really a place of refuge. It became because of just with my parents had divorced and we were going through just a hard time emotionally. I just felt lost, and what and I'd always been a big reader, but then I was early teens and just finding that library, like you said, as a refuge, and the wonderful librarians there that just encouraged me to check out stacks and stacks of books, and would always ask me, "Are you reading all of these?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I sure am. I sure am." And it, started to go from that to, well, if you like those, you're going to love this one. And just feeding that creativity and that love of learning, love of reading. I owe a huge debt to libraries just to make me who I am today. Beyond even just reading, like you said, there's programs, there's people who come in. There's a library near us, and I think this week they're having a guest in to talk. She climbed Mount Everest, and she's
Well,
coming to talk about her experiences. And I I need to go to that. I need to go to
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is. It's the library, and I think it's grown in this regard. That it is a melting pot of the community.
Mhm.
It is a gathering place. It is a spot in which cultures and people converge. And so, not only seeing it as a place of, I'm sure academia and just gaining knowledge, but, running into people who you've never met or sharing, similar tastes and stories with someone who you've never seen. It's just that place of refuge, not only as you mentioned, but for all. Everyone should be able to feel safe and accepted within a library space because it is one of those almost hallowed ground and sacred places that we have in our community that should be open to everyone and serving everyone in the same capacity.
Bouncing off that, then you've had some experience working in libraries and things of that nature. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you saw libraries impacting your community?
Yeah, in the community which I work in, I live in Columbus, Ohio. And so I worked for the local library system here, which is, serving a very diverse set of a group of people. I mean, we have people and cultures from East West African, very large speaking Spanish speaking population, growing Asian community here. And so I was privileged to work in a library branch as a youth specialist and learning center specialist, where I would serve the course the library needs of the community, but also develop and serve the academic needs of the kids after school. And so each day, I would see between 80 and 120 kids a day
Mm.
from various cultures, over 20 different nations represented in this academic center. And we would just connect, build, and grow as a family. And it was so worthwhile. It was so enriching that it changed my life and my perspective on people. My view on libraries changed from just being a place of books to being a place of people,
Mhm.
and from serving people and providing people with literature and things to take home to giving people life lessons to take home. And so my views on library changed into growing to more of a community viewpoint. How does this library not only serve the academic needs of the community, but also to serve those who may not be coming in for a book, those who may just be coming in for a safe place, those who may be coming in because their friends are here, those who are just looking for a place just to rest, to chill, to relax, and just to be in a place of acceptance.
My wife works part time at our local library, and we live in a rural community. We're in the middle of Iowa. It's ethnically we're not very diverse here, but economically we are.
Yeah.
We have very very impoverished families, and then we have the very wealthy, retired farmer kind of deal. But when she started working there, she had all these kids coming in and just kind of hanging out and playing computer games on the computer and all that, and she's trying to say, hey, are you here for books? Why you guys? I don't know. She gets talking with them and gets to know them, and realize that for some of them, it's that same idea that I'm here because I'm safe here. You know, it's a safe place. It gives us a place to gather, and sometimes they can get ornery, you know, as
Yep.
kids can do, but it really provides them a community, almost like a community center,
Yeah.
in that sense. But then she's noticed too that she's been able to get to know people in the town better. She can order books for them, but then she also helps some of them print things. And
Yep.
I think she's even helped people like schedule a COVID test online. We've got an older community, so they don't really know how to do the computers very well. So they come in and she helps them with that. So yeah, far and beyond just here's a book, which
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah, it's changed because
Yeah.
it's evolved, and I think it's a great thing for libraries if libraries make a choice to accept this change, in which it really is shifting the focus from we hold the information that the community has. You know, we hold the books. We are the keepers of knowledge. To how can we help you? You know, and it's not just, you know, as we said, it's people may come in looking for a book, and that's what they think they're coming in to look for, but sometimes they're coming in to look for empathy.
Mm,
Sometimes they're coming in to look for some encouragement. And
mm,
so it's like, what else can you provide outside of that book? For youth, what else can you provide outside of the book that they request for school that they don't want to read, but they sort of have to for this assignment? How can you turn that moment into an experience of momentum? And so, you know, and those are things that I just, you know, believe within, not only in library settings, but just in settings in general. That's creating a culture of community, and creating a culture of, you're not just a patron, a library patron. You're not a customer. You're my neighbor, and
mm.
you're a person, and you should, you know. And I'm honored to serve you. I'm honored to help you. I'm honored to know you. I'm honored to speak with you. And so, libraries serve, and have the opportunity to create that type of life changing, and I do mean life changing impact in the lives of people.
That whole idea of, treating someone like a person. I can remember, librarians treating me that way, not excited to see me. And,
Mhm.
oh, here's a kid who loves to read, and he's going to, make use of our resources and all that. But, just being treated with that dignity that, um, maybe not everyone always gets, even
Mhm.
at home, unfortunately. And that can have a powerful impact on a person, definitely.
It's a
But
space in which, it's, I mean, and I hate to even, you know, draw this equivalency, but, you know, we've all seen Cheers, you know, a place where everyone knows, you know, your name, and the
Mhm.
library is Cheers minus the bar, minus
Yeah,
perhaps depending on the library, minus the alcohol.
yeah,
And so it's a place of that people come to. You know, some days I've seen customers, you know, each day of the week. For a lot of the kids in the academic center in which I was running, it was 5 days a week, you know, for 15 hours, 20 hours a week, that we talked, we communicated, we were in each other's presence. And so it's more than just a place, it is a destination for a lot of people.
do you have any favorite memories from your time working there, or any funny stories?
Oh, so many memories. When I first started, I worked. The kids that were in the program were predominantly East or West African, and so, you know, it was different for me to work in such a diverse population. In my first week there, I noticed one student who I've known before, and we made that connection there in the academic center. And it was busy. And like I said, it was 80 to 120 kids a day. I was thrown into the fire. Like, what do I do? What's going on? Who are these kids? I'm an introvert, so I was already sort of apprehensive just a bit, but I knew I was there on purpose. And at the end of my second day, we had some kids that were sharing a meal in the library. And I came over, I greeted them, and they pulled up a chair for me. And they partitioned or gave, put some food on a plate for me.
Hmm.
And it was like, oh my gosh, are we eating in the library? Now, in my mind, I'm freaking out like, oh my gosh, kids are eating in the library. But I had to see the bigger moment
Yeah.
in which, in giving me a piece of their meal, they were sharing their heart, their culture, their love, and their acceptance with me. And so that was life changing for me because it showed me the power of a meal, the power of always having a seat at the table, and really just the power of love. I mean, that moment helped propel me for years to always provide a seat at the table for whoever's in my presence, and provide a meal for them, and ultimately share my love with them.
Wow, that's a powerful, life-changing moment. Goodness. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's those moments like that happen in the library, and it's people are like, it's just a library, it's just a space. Nah, it's so much more. There are difficult moments that pop up,
Hmm.
but there are moments that are just mind blowing, when it comes to just how much they've impacted my life and how I've seen other people's lives impact in such a positive way.
How can we best support our local library?
You know, I think that when it comes to supporting our local library, communities have to speak to libraries, and voice what they want from a library. And libraries have to hear what the community is speaking. We live in a time in which resources sometimes dwindle, especially in light of this pandemic and things like that, and space has changed, where people gather have changed, life has changed, and so as libraries move forward, this almost archaic model of just being there for books, this antiquated model of you can't come into the library unless you're doing some sort of book work. Um, Libraries can't operate in that same capacity. In communities and families have to speak that need to libraries. As always, visit your local library. Be a fixture in the local library because libraries have so much to offer, when it comes to resources, when it comes to academic services, when it comes to job readiness, and resume building things. I mean, there's so many different services in a library. But also, I want to encourage people, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to write a letter to the CEO of your library, to the directors of your library, to your branch managers, to let them know how they can best serve your needs and, therefore the needs of the community.
One of the benefits of having such a small town that we live in is, there's just two librarians at our library and everybody knows them. So
That's great. Yeah.
it's just perfect. You can go in and suggest, and
Mhm.
I've asked my wife that question before about how can we support libraries, and she's basically said, well, use them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're more, like you said, there's more than books offered there, and they can help all in all sorts of ways. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I've said it before, but I'd be lost without my library, and yeah, it's such an important part of a community. Any final thoughts on libraries, or any uh, I don't know, words of encouragement you want to give us, or to your fellow librarians out there?
Yeah. No, I want to, encourage, and first thank, librarians and all library workers for their service. Your work, as I keep on saying, is more than just books. Your work is literally helping people write the stories of their lives. And so, I want to encourage, library workers to see what they do each day as creating positive impact. Don't just go to your job position. Allow your job position to help show you your life purpose. You have the opportunity to change someone's life. You have the opportunity to create a smile for someone. You have the opportunity to make someone's day each and every day. Like you were right there in the center of the moment. So take it, and use that moment to create positive momentum. I love, as a former library professional, and just as also as a, development coach. I love speaking to libraries and people in the library system to help them see the bigger picture of what they do each and every day. And so if there are any libraries that will, are interested in me speaking about youth development services or creating a positive culture that serves the needs of diverse communities, I would be honored to speak, because, we are really that important in the community. Libraries play such a vital role in our development, our connection, and just the fabric of the community.
Well, I like to ask our guests one final question before near the end, and that is to tell us, when did you realize that words held power?
I realized that words held power. Ironically, when I was at the library, in which I would encourage the students each day. I will always try to be that person to help motivate, encourage, and just show and display love. But when my students did the same thing for me, and I had to listen to their words of encouragement, of motivation, almost take my own medicine, I realized um, that words create change. Our voices, our words, our speech have the power to change the trajectory of life in itself. And so, you know, use your voice. Use your voice. I'm very conscious of my voice. And as an introvert, when I choose to speak, I want to make sure that my words are measured, but I also want to make sure that they are impactful, and that that I mean what I say, and that my words are authentic. So, yeah, it took probably about 7 years ago when a student sat me down and said, "Mr. Aaron, you need to listen to what I'm saying," and I listened. And in that moment, I was the student and they were the teacher, and I learned the lesson.
Oh, that's neat. I love it when we learn from even people younger than us, but
Yep.
we gotta listen. And then, is there any project or anything you're doing right now you'd like to promote and let us know about?
Yeah, I spoke on the professional development piece for libraries, and so if anybody's interested, check me out on my website. It is called IamMufali.com. I'll spell that out: IAMMUFALI.com, for any of your professional development needs. I would love to come and speak to your library via Zoom or in person, since we seem to be opening things back up slowly across this nation, the world. And also do one-on-one, services for library professionals too. But I'm also, working continually just to build my podcast. I have a podcast called The Semi-Social Life of a Black Introvert. And so it just talks about my everyday dealings, what may happen, current events, what happens in my life, and also have some pretty interesting podcast guests on there. So you could click or subscribe to that on Spotify, Google, Apple, any major podcast streaming service. But yeah, other than that, I'm just going to continue to write, continue to build, and continue to walk on my life purpose.
But yeah, I listened to a couple of episodes of your podcast. Really enjoyed it, and
Thank you.
so from one introvert to another, thank you for getting your message out.
Absolutely. Introverts are out there. We speak.
Yep.
We speak. We just may not be the loudest voice in the room.
That's right. That's right. But all right. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for taking some time today to talk about your passion, and best of luck to you and your future endeavors. And
All right. Thank you so much.
thank you so much for watching. As always, you will find the show notes and links below that Aaron mentioned, and some other and books that we've talked about. You'll find links below for them as well. And again, want to thank Aaron so much for coming on the podcast to talking about a passion that both he and I have for libraries. And let me encourage you to check out his website. That if you want any of his services he offers, I think it'll be well worth the time. So you can check out his website there. It's linked below. And so until next time, happy reading.